Hello, and welcome to a quick overview to help with reducing cognitive overload. We will take a look at 3 techniques that are sure to improve your lessons for your learners. Over the next few minutes, I will show you 3 principles discussed in the Cambridge Handbook of Multimedia Learning to reduce extraneous cognitive load and, in turn, increase or deepen your learners' understanding. By the end of this lesson, you will have a better understanding of the following: the signaling principle, the spatial contiguity principle, and the temporal contiguity principle. The first one, the signaling principle, is one that is discussed in the handbook to reduce cognitive load. Specifically, the signaling principle says that you can reduce extraneous cognitive load by providing signals or cues to the learner as a way to highlight the essential information being presented. This will, in turn, improve the learner's understanding of the essential information. As you can see in this passage, there is a lot of information, and it can be difficult to pull out the essential details. However, if we add just a little bit of what we have learned from the signaling principle, the passage will be easier for the learner to understand. Let's take a look at what this could look like. As you can see here now, the essential information is much easier to pull out of the passage. The most important details are easily identified by the bold, underlined formatting applied to the text, and you could just read those portions and tell me a highlight of Wright State's history. The next principle I would like to discuss is all about the placement of the words being presented to describe an image or a video. It's the spatial contiguity principle. This is another way discussed in the handbook to reduce extraneous cognitive load. The spatial contiguity principle states that people learn better when corresponding words and pictures are presented near rather than far from each other on the page or screen. As you can see in this example, the learner has to go back and forth between the information and the image to determine where the different areas are. This causes a split in the learner's attention and prevents him or her from experiencing a deep level of understanding. This information could be much more effective if the designer simply applied the spatial contiguity principle. So now, as you can see here in this image, the information about the regions is much easier to read and in turn associate with the corresponding areas of the U.S. This is just one example of how you can simplify the learning experience for the learner by making the words and images closer rather than further apart. Next is the temporal contiguity principle. This is another way discussed in the handbook to reduce extraneous cognitive load. This principle states that people learn better when corresponding narration and animation are presented simultaneously rather than successively. In other words, the words are spoken at the same time they're illustrated in the animation. As you may have already noticed here in this slide, that is not what is happening. You might even have found yourself thrown off a little bit by the animation, or perhaps you're still wondering what information is going to be presented on the slide. Let's take a look at a better example of this principle. To demonstrate a good use of the temporal contiguity principle, I will present the information about why this principle works. The temporal contiguity principle says that by presenting the information at the same time it is able to be processed, it is going to reduce the amount of information that has to be stored in working memory. And ultimately, this makes the information easier to understand. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick lesson and that you now have a better understanding of the following: the signaling principle, the spatial contiguity principle, and the temporal contiguity principle. Thank you for your time and attention. If you would like more information regarding the topics covered here, check out the Cambridge Handbook of Multimedia Learning and make sure you pick up the 2nd edition. Again, my name is Jason, and I hope you have enjoyed this lesson.